Hello, Jack.
Okay.
I don't know who they all are. Let's see. I'm on. Nagel's on. Frank Little's on. Who's 828-277-6493?
This
It's Walt Blair. Okay.
This is Bennett. Bennett's on.
That's Bennett. Okay. Then we've got 850-224-0711.
That's me. Yep.
And then we got Charlie Paul.
Okay, so we don't have Frank Snyder yet?
No, Jack Snyder's on, yes.
I mean, Jack Snyder. How about Frank Little?
Frank
He's
Little.
here.
How about Walt Boyer?
Yeah, I'm on.
Okay, how about the president of the Washington Association?
Helmut Goldie? He's not on.
I don't think he's on the committee, is he?
No, but he's been invited to participate today.
Oh, okay.
But I don't think he's going to. I think he said he had something else to do.
Well, I'm going to have to duck off early. We're going down to Olympia for a meeting with the committee on CCRCs, the first one that we've had. So we've finally been able to organize that. So
Well, that's
we
pretty.
and Leading Age.
I mean,
We and
that's,
Leading Age are both making a presentation today, so I may have to take off early.
yeah, that is a very big deal in any state. So don't bemoan that it took time to get it organized. There are some states that have never accomplished that. So we're having that here.
Well, good. Jack, you got you recorded on again.
Well, yeah, this is well, anyway, this computer sucks, but I hope it works. Keep going.
Okay. Most of this I did not know or did not have a good way of finding out until I got to doing some researching and got to getting information on current emails. Then I had about an hour and a half conversation with our president, Bob Nichols, who had a whole lot more information than I had. So he fed me some emails and other misinformation I did not have. Plus, he was able to brief me on some of the things that happened at the Washington meeting when Dan Seeger was out there. It appears to be very solid evidence that Dan Seeger told Washington State President that if you get us some members and send them to NaCCRA, we will have a dual membership, and they will be members of your Washington organization as well as members of the national organization. Now, what he didn't tell anybody or agree on with anybody was a cost of this or how it would work. It was just that he agreed that that's what it would be. After I reviewed all of this and I was given a couple of copies of the last meetings of the Washington State folks, I come to the conclusion that NaCCRA, to maintain integrity, had to take some actions based on what Dan Seeger had promised. Now, I know backing up to our second meeting, I think it was our first, Frank Little proposed a joint membership thing where we were given $3 of the dues and he would keep 17. I could find nowhere that was ever discussed. Then Bob asked Jack, or Jack just did it, drafted a draft alliance that could be entered into by Washington State and NaCCRA, where he just arbitrarily put a split of $10. Anyway, I took all of this information and I went to our experts, partners in association management, and had a conversation with Bennett. And I asked him, and I knew that I believe most of the donations have been returned to Washington State, and I don't, for the life of me, know how you propose to treat that on income taxes, because without a 501c3, Washington State is not authorized to receive donations, and the proper things have not transpired with IRS for NaCCRA to give those donations to Washington State. So that's a situation that still needs work on it. But in any case, Bennett told me that for a period of time, the treasurer of NaCCRA could support a $10 split. And as a result of all this, I want to propose to the president of NaCCRA, as soon as our meeting is over today, if this committee supports it.
Can I add some additional information, Charlie?
Yes, when I get through.
Okay.
I want to propose to him that he take to the NaCCRA board that they accept Washington State as an affiliate member from the time that Dan Seeger made his presentation in front of the members of the Washington State meeting out in Seattle, and to split the dues $10, and that this will remain in effect for 1 year from that date of Dan Seeger's presentation until a year later, or until this board approves a procedure for all members in NaCCRA. And then, of course, all members, if they remain members, would have to comply with what the committee recommends and the NaCCRA board approves. Hopefully that will occur no later than in the Washington, D.C. meeting coming up in March. I see nothing wrong with using Jack's draft alliance if we correct the problems about one of the things Jack in there is that Washington State, I think, is Article 3.2, where they acknowledge that they shall remain separate legal entities and that no partnership, joint venture, or agency is created by virtue of this agreement. You can't have that if they're going to be under the umbrella of NaCCRA's 501c3.
Yeah, I agree. I took that. That was because I used the leading age thing as a template, and that just snuck in there. I talked to Helmut about that over the weekend. Consider that gone. Okay.
Well, anyway, my proposal will be to Bob that his board approve an agreement that complies with all IRS regulations on an affiliate operating under the wing of NaCCRA. Now, with that in mind, any questions or any discussions we can have, or if someone wants to make a motion that we adopt that now.
This is Jack Snyder. I'd like to add to it by stating that a year ago when I went in preparation to go to the Nashville meeting to learn more about NaCCRA, I studied everything that NaCCRA had put out on how do you start a state organization. And it said specifically in that we would get a split of so much money. I don't remember the amount. It was not a 50-50 split, but it said very clearly that the state chapter would get something. So on that basis, I went to NaCCRA, and we had announced that we were going to have a meeting and do all our things planned, and I think it was Jack.
Jack, if I could, as soon as we get through with Washington, I was going to go to you.
Okay, well then I'll hold off.
Okay. Anything else on Washington?
Well, I think what Jack Snyder's saying is relevant. It goes back to this.
Well, it is relevant, and I got it. It's the second item on the agenda today.
Yeah, no, okay. Let me just see if we can clarify. The question is whether we want all state associations to be totally separate and independent of NaCCRA, and NaCCRA is just supported by the states for whatever purposes, or whether we want to have a unified or move toward unity so that people don't have this confusion of having to join two organizations. And Jack was alluding, we had started to move in that direction following the model of FLICRA, but Joe Walton, and supported by Ruth, shot that down. So Jack's absolutely right that he was led along that path, and I think the Washington folks were led along that path as well, because it seemed like the logical way to go from a business.
Jack, I agree with you, but I want to hold our conversation to Washington State right now.
All right, can I?
Well, we're setting a precedent with Washington.
Beg your pardon?
It's a good precedent. You've asked for a motion. I assume you made a motion. I'll second the motion.
No, I can't make a motion.
Yeah, I think the chair can make a motion. Well, anyway, all right. I'll make the motion you articulated.
All right, 12-4, I'll second it.
Okay. Now,
can I make some comments from Washington?
Yes.
Thank you. Basically, I think what I've tried to communicate to this committee, and I hope, kept up to date with Helmut and others that are on the board here, that my understanding and my agreement at this point is that as we move forward, the best thing is to have the independent state organizations and have strongly pushed our board to consider incorporating in Washington and to follow through on that basis, with the understanding that once we have made and the board of NaCCRA has agreed on with all of the various state organizations on how they want to proceed on the funding and financing of NaCCRA, that we would follow along with that. There's no question at all. I think there's no question that we would be comfortable with the $3 or $5 or whatever it may turn out to be. And my understanding, now I know there are a lot of conversations that are taking place, people calling people and thinking that all of a sudden decisions have been made. I don't think any decisions have been made, as far as I understand, by the executive committee or the board of Washington, as far as whether or not they want to incorporate and which way they want to go. I think they're leaning that way, but I wouldn't want to make statements for them. So I think it's premature at this point for this kind of motion to go forward. Obviously, we're very happy to get money back into the drawer because we got things that we're going to be doing, but on the other hand, that's not going to be the critical factor in what we do. To me, trying to formalize all of this past stuff at this juncture, I don't think is going to be of any great benefit. Bob Nicholson may have a different opinion with regard to that, but at this juncture, I'm more interested in what we're going to be doing with the other states and using Illinois and Washington as examples of what kind of new organizations may be coming in. And but our biggest problem to me is not worrying about Washington or Illinois, but is worrying about what North Carolina, Connecticut, Virginia, Pennsylvania, New York, California are willing to do to make NaCCRA a solid national organization. So
Right.
that all drop off.
This is Jack Cumming. I think you're absolutely right. As I understand the motion, all it would do is to give Washington an option, an opportunity.
Fine.
And are you? I'd be puzzled why.
I have no problem with that.
Okay, good.
Yeah, one more time, let me state what the motion will be. That the NaCCRA board, in response to the promises made by a former president, that if individual members in Washington State join NaCCRA, they would accept Washington State as an affiliate state member and share the dues with Washington State during their period of organization. They failed to do that. And one of the, you can't just give somebody some money if you're a 501c3 without it being in accordance with the rules and regulations of the IRS Corporation. And to solve that happened, I think it was an injustice. I think really Dan fully intended to do that. He thought he could do it. And I have found out the board can, by doing it in a proper way, can split these dues that has been paid in to the national organization with the state of Washington, and for 1 year until this committee comes up with something sooner. And that's all it's doing. It's just putting some integrity in our past president's voice.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, this is Bennett. Can I clarify something? You're at the discussion stage.
Yes, sir.
Just to clarify something, I think you had expressed offline you're not including life members, only the either the $20 or the $15 membership categories, correct?
Correct. It's just, well, yeah, I was including the $15 ones. We would retain 10 of that and leave Washington with 5. We would retain 10 of both of the individual members, but leave the life members as they stand.
The life members generate $20, so you give back 10 for each of them for 1 year. They generate $20 a year of income.
Yeah, it could be. The board could work it out that way. The biggest problem that the NaCCRA board's got to do is work out keeping themselves legal with the IRS.
Well, let's go ahead and get a vote on the motion and leave it open.
Any other discussion? Okay, call a vote. And Jack, would you let's do it by roll call.
Which Jack?
You. You're recording it.
Oh, okay. Let's see. Okay. Oh, I'm recording. Okay. Well then, anyway. Okay. I vote aye.
I'll vote aye, Frank.
12-4.
Bob Nagel votes aye.
Okay.
That's what, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm the fifth one, and I vote aye.
Okay. Who else is on the call here?
Later, I don't mean to be obstinate, but I think this is totally out of context about where we should do. I'll vote aye, but I think it's totally inappropriate. I think what Frank said before the vote, this is Snyder, when Frank said before the vote that he thought that this was appropriate, I was agreeing with him. Now he's changed his mind. I just think it throws a whole thing in the monkey wrench, and I think Washington will get straightened around by the time we ever get through with what this committee is set up to do. I think it's a distraction, an unnecessary distraction, but I'll vote yes just to keep things consistent.
That's where I am, Jeff.
I think Washington needs money right away, and so this is a way to get them what they need. And
Jack, I appreciate that, and I've had some information brought to me over the weekend that led me to this discussion. Some information from the people in Washington, because I don't think they see this as a distraction to what they're doing or to what we're doing either. Now I want to go to Illinois. I had about a pretty good session with Jack Snyder in Nashville, and we really just talked in general. And when I left, Jack, and in fact 2 of the Jacks were there, when I left I had the impression that everything was fine in Illinois. And let me finish this minute, then I'm going to come back to you, Jack. And then I found that there had been some not necessarily good words between Illinois folks and our leadership on who should do and when they should do it and stuff like that. I don't know how we got into this mess, but the general population only knew about revenue sharing 4 years ago or so, and as Jack so boldly stated, a couple of people shot it down right off the bat. They didn't want any part of it. And it never got opened again until Dan Seeger. I'll have to take my hat off to him, and I wish he'd have made his actions public, because he could still be sitting as president now with a huge organization if he would have made that public knowledge and went about it the right way rather than trying to keep it a secret. So I don't know. I could find no real discontent or no real evidence of anything being diffused with Illinois other than they were led to believe somehow, some way, that the dues to NaCCRA was going to be revenue sharing dues, that they would get back some of it.
There's a document that was created that apparently, but I didn't know that, was not passed by the board of directors, but there was a document that spelled out how do you get a state organization going. I went down to Nashville, talked with a number of people, including you, Charlie, and Jack, and Bob, and came to the conclusion that there is no such document that's been approved. Therefore, I felt that I was misled all the time, because the reason I went down was to figure out the details of how do you start a state organization and the benefits of us having a state organization here. I left after having a long conversation with Bob, and he told me, and I have it here, do it any way you want, Jack. So we left NaCCRA behind. There were a number of, we had already had our membership drive, and at that point I think we had about 60 people that had said yes, and 48 or 50 of them had already sent their money in, and that was continuing to climb. And then we recruited an individual, David Curtis, to be the president, and we got an organization going in Illinois, independent of NaCCRA, because we weren't going to sell two memberships. We were going to sell one membership. It's complicated enough to sell one membership, yet alone two, and why two didn't make any sense. And so we proceeded to get an Illinois chapter going and left NaCCRA behind. And I can tell you, as a result of Bob's speech here, he turned none of those people around in his presentation. It was a discombobulated presentation on NaCCRA to the residents here, and he turned them off to NaCCRA, quite frankly. You know, David and I looked at each other and thought, wow, this is bad, but we couldn't stop him in the middle of his presentation. And other people said, that's NaCCRA leadership? Jack, why are you even involved with them? And the rest is history. All the rest of you know that. There may have been words said, because I've never seen a more discombobulated organization than was there, with the combination of our present president and Seeger, and nobody else seemed to know what was going on. And he was, you know, I thought that I would find, as a result of talking with Jack before I went down, a welcome climate for starting new state organizations and new people coming. And I didn't get the discounted hotel room, but that was okay. But there we were optimistic that we were going to find the procedures, the step-by-step procedures. I wouldn't know how to tell another state to get going, because there's nothing out of NaCCRA, and if it came out of NaCCRA, it would be assumed to be approved, not something that Jack had written that was never approved, and yet was published that I could print it up. So I'm extremely frustrated, and my whole reason in wanting to be on this board is to get a method of recruiting new members for NaCCRA and state organizations, so we have one organization that we're representing, and how the money is split behind the scenes is yet to be decided. But I do remember Bob saying very clearly at Boston, just think, if we could get $3 from every Florida resident, we'd be in hog heaven. And that was the view, and so that was carried back to Illinois, and we said, okay, we get members for 15. Can we afford $3 to send to the state? We should have known that before, but we're just paddling our own canoe, as Bob suggested to us that we do. And that's where we are right now.
Yeah,
Very good.
that's exactly what I've uncovered, and I couldn't come up with a solid way to support yours, and this all didn't really come together for me until mid-morning this morning. What would you recommend we do about Illinois now, if anything?
Well, I don't think the question is just Illinois. I think it's Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky, and all the other states that have CCRCs. What are we going to do for them? How could I or anybody else encourage somebody to get a state organization going if the first requirement is, well, you got to get so many members for NaCCRA first?
You're
Doesn't
very
make
right,
any
Jack.
I'm sorry?
You're very right.
I think Illinois and Washington, to some extent, are on the cutting edge of the way you're going to grow, because I don't think you're going to grow the way you are now, and to continue doing the same things over and over and over again is insanity, expecting different results. And I think the only way to go is to grow by states, and I believe that if NaCCRA were supportive of state getting started, we'd be a lot farther ahead, and we wouldn't have the discombobulation that we have now with all different states doing it all their different ways. I think we can make it stronger, have one method.
Jack, I hear what you're saying, but let me give you a little history. The founding people, I started to say fathers, but they were some girls also. The founding men and women had as in their bylaws and procedures that they would only accept state organizations, that's all they wanted. I come along as the third president, and it was very obvious to me, I'm sorry, the fourth president, because the third one died in office. It was very obvious to me when I got involved in NaCCRA that there was no way they could survive with just state organizations. And at my first meeting, I made a motion that they include community members and members of people living in CCRCs and members that supported NaCCRA. And they approved that right then because they knew they had to have some money. So then we started recruiting members of communities, and of course I had to do that in the people I knew best, so I did most of my recruiting in Florida initially, and then I went to New York secondly and got a couple of communities there. But that gave us some quick relief on finances, and we still was not pushing individual membership like we should, and we got started on it, and unfortunately the third president made a deal with one state, and he was taking the $15 for NaCCRA and giving the state 8 of it back without anybody else knowing it. And you know, you just can't run a railroad like that. And so we got that squared away, and then individual members became the way we went. When the next president come along, he kind of just floated with everything that was happening, and he did push individual members to a degree. But then Ruth Walsh from Connecticut was elected, and I don't remember who presented the FLACRA model to the organization. I think it was me, but I might be wrong. But somebody did anyway about the revenue sharing in Florida between NaCCRA and Florida. Between Florida and his communities. And that system was very simple. If you want to form a chapter in a community, you get 50 members, and you automatically become a chapter of NaCCRA and FLACRA, and you automatically get $2 for each member that joins back into your treasury. And that was a godsend for the residents of Florida, and that's why they have the membership that they now have. But in retrospect, without the community members that come on board, NaCCRA would not have survived that year that they were started. But it was obvious to me the whole time I was the president that the only way we could thrive was to have individual members. The only thing a member of the U.S. Congress wants to know when you sit down and talk to them, how many people are you representing? Now, some of them would say, if you say 100,000, they say, well, why don't you represent all 600,000? And we said, well, we do, they just don't know it. And he said, well, why don't you get the word out that you're representing all? And that was the attitude of the U.S. Congress. If we got a national organization of residents, we ought to be representing all of them. And then maybe they'd get around to joining. But that was slow about coming about. And during the last 3-4 years, we've had pretty good growth in individual membership. But like a lot of things, when you have senior volunteers, time is limited, sicknesses occur, you're unable to work for periods of time, and that all has plagued NaCCRA over the years, like it plagues some states. So my goal has been for a long time in NaCCRA that we could get big enough that we would have an organization like Bennett's that would do the legal management of the organization, and then the older residents that wanted to become officers in it could do all of the volunteer work, and that would free up their time to do that, and it would just be a better organization. But, you know, we still got states and communities that have totally different ideas on which way we should go. That's why when we started this a few weeks ago that I did, it's a difficult task. We're fixing it after this meeting today. We're going to take a break until after the holidays, and I'm going to attempt to do my best to get some input from all of the states that we have some leadership in. Getting them to agree is going to be very, very difficult. I don't think it's impossible, but it's going to be hard to get it communicated to all the members and get a consensus back. So that's really where we are in this mess. And to say that, say we had some dysfunctional periods, absolutely correct. To say that we've never done nothing, absolutely incorrect. We've had some old folks in this organization that devoted hours to getting it organized, getting it up and running, and not necessarily having the finances to do it with, and then they would solicit other people to finance their travel and stuff like that. So we've had some great, great people in this organization that created a good service for you and me and all future people in life communities or CCRCs or whatever it's going to be called in the future.
Could you identify anything in the last 3 years that NaCCRA has really done? Last 3 years, not 3.
You know, 3 years ago I had a series of 3 strokes, and I am really not one to ask about the 3 years. I can tell you this. There's been some people in NaCCRA still working towards making it grow. What they've actually done, I couldn't put a handle on, but I guarantee you they've been some men that's done a lot of work for you.
I think
I seen you pick up your phone, so I was fixing to call on you.
Oh, well, I think Walt Boyer could answer that question really effectively. He's been involved.
I think so, Jack. In the last 3 years, we have submitted 10 model laws to the National Association of Insurance Commissioners, intended to create a situation among the states so that the funds at CCRCs are managed in the same manner or very similar to the way they're handled by insurance companies. Now, nothing has happened with those yet, in large measure due to the fact that the NAIC was very largely impacted by the Affordable Care Act of President Obama, and they've been busy trying to get their state laws in shape to handle the Affordable Care Act. Now that that's pretty much done, I think we can start working on the NAIC to do something about the model laws that we've submitted. Last year, this happened 2 years ago. Last year, together some recommendations regarding residents' rights. We've had 2 states pass legislation concerning residents' rights for CCRC residents, and I anticipate that there'll be a 3rd one in Washington later this month. So those are two things that we've done in the last 3 years.
May
One was
Bob Nagel?
laws, and the second one was what?
Was the residents' rights. We've had residents' rights laws passed in Massachusetts and in Connecticut, and there's a bill in Washington State. Similarly,
No, there's no bill. No, there is no bill in Washington State.
There?
We're
I thought there was
basically
one.
no. Basically, the extent to which, and by the way, the Bill of Rights has been very helpful as a focal point. But we're basically really, that's what the meeting today is, the first meeting where there's been a hearing basically on CCRCs, which is including a presentation for a half hour by Leading Age and a half hour by residents. So from that, we hope that we will begin to see some move. We've basically pushed the Legislative Council to look at the California law as the one that we think might be the model. We definitely are pushing to have it go to the Insurance Commissioner, and we're not too sure about what his attitude is going to be. We haven't been able to get him to buy on, but our concern is that it would go to Social Services, and we hope that that won't happen. So we're still in a very early stage. This is a interim legislative period, short term. The possibilities it'll come up for legislation during the interim is probably relatively small, and we're really gearing ourselves towards the next biennium, which would be 2 years out.
I see. Well, I was misspoken then and misinformed as well. I can also say that one of the CCRCs in Arizona has been pressing, using the recommendations from NaCCRA with their board of directors to get residents' rights established at that CCRC. But it's not a spied thing in Arizona.
No, our board just turned us down for that, and there are three others here in Washington that have it before their boards at this point in time.
Yeah.
So we have all used the model which was created by NaCCRA, used changing names and changing some of the things in it, but that has been a very big thing. Our biggest thing is we would like to be able to go to the state of Washington and say that NaCCRA is 20, 30,000 members. We can't say anything like that. And that's why my emphasis in all of this is let's get off all this past stuff and look at how do we get the various states to just come on board at whatever minimum charge it has to be, just to get them to put their members in, pay that, and move forward so we have a national organization.
Absolutely, Frank.
Yeah.
This is Senator. I agree with you 100%.
Yeah. This is Walt Boyer. I'd like to summarize a couple of things that I've heard over the last 2 or 3 meetings, if I may. The first is that currently, as of today, our due structure is basically $500 for states, $200 for communities and for lifetime individual members, and $20 for individual members. I think it was our last meeting we talked about the concept of having a $5 due for an individual membership in a state if all the state members, 100% of state members, also joined NaCCRA and the dues were collected jointly together. Today we've talked about splitting with $10 each with Washington, the state of Washington. To me, this sounds
Put that aside, Walt. Yeah.
Want to have, and we may end up with 3 types of state memberships. One in which the basic state membership with a state that is organized as individual members, which is like Florida and North Carolina and California and many of those, and I think Illinois is going that way too. It's organized, has a 501c something license, and that would be nominally $20 per individual, except if they collected dues and shared them with NaCCRA for all our members. It would be only $5 or some number which we can get Bennett to advise us on. Second set would be for new states that were getting organized that did not yet have a separate license to operate independently of NaCCRA. So they were really part of NaCCRA, and in those cases, we would split the $20 dues evenly between us. The third set has to do with the state of Connecticut, which I understand. I really don't understand exactly how they work, but what I've heard is that they have memberships by communities and not by individuals. So we'll have to come up with something different for them. I'm in favor of eliminating the $500 state dues for those states that fall in the last two categories. That is, the new states, we're splitting it, and those states that have 100% NaCCRA membership and collect dues.
Well, you're getting to something that's on our agenda. We just hadn't got to it yet.
Okay.
Well, but let's go on with it, because I think this is very good.
Well, I think in order to do that, we're going to have to change the bylaws. And earlier there was some question asked about whether this committee was going to look at the bylaws at all, and we may have to do that in order to come up with a proper way of doing all this. And so that's one of my recommendations. But I think that going that way is a good idea, frankly, and I would recommend it.
Okay. Could I just add one thing to what I think your
analysis
is?
Please identify yourself for everybody, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. This is Frank. This is Frank speaking. What I would like to recommend is that we set up a structure and say to start with all of the existing fee arrangements that we have are passed. We're going to start with a new structure. So the 500s, the whatever they are, other than the life memberships, because I think some people like to have a life membership. But other than that, everything would be done at the state level. And we would just try to draft an agreement that would go with each of the states and say, okay, you will pay in, and the budget of NaCCRA will reflect based upon each state putting in $3, $5, $2, whatever we decide to recommend, and the board then will be the ones that make that decision. We can just make a recommendation, but it will be a certain amount, $5 or less, for every member that they have. And that will allow us, and I think the selling point to the states has to be that if we can do this, we can then say that NaCCRA is 25,000 members. You can use it in your own state with your legislature, which we would do ourselves. We can use it on a national basis. But I think we can simplify the whole thing if we just start out with assuming that all of these various systems that we have for funding NaCCRA today are all just put aside, and we're going to come up with a single, simple system, and which has two types of memberships. One, you can buy a life membership if you want to, because that's a nice thing to be able to do. But other than that, you come through to NaCCRA through your state group, and they incorporate you into NaCCRA in their payment to NaCCRA. That's where I'm coming from.
This is Jack Cumming, and I think you're on the right track, Frank. The route is really through the community, because the recruitment takes place at the local CCRC. That's our fundamental unit, and they recruit people to be part of a state, and the state says, gee, let's be part of NaCCRA. I think that the transition is a little more complicated than the devil's in the details. You know, the different states, somebody mentioned Connecticut, but New Jersey, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, all are following the same pattern. So we've got to, I think Walt Boyer's right. We do need to change the bylaws. We got pretty far with that in Boston. This committee has not worked with documents at all. But from what I can tell, they just haven't worked with the documents. But we've shared some ideas there. I think also, for the sake of clarity, we need to have the agreements with the states so that everybody's on the same track and we don't have the kinds of misunderstandings that you and Jack Snyder and to a lesser extent Walt Boyer have been talking about today. It's through documents and having written agreements of understanding. I think it's desirable to provide incentives for states to work their way out of the $500. So I think we could put something like that together, and I think Walt has properly identified the different approaches that might work, but we're entering into a transition period, and I don't think we're just going to wipe the slate clean and start from scratch. That would offend an awful lot of people out in the States who, that would concern me.
Okay.
Yeah, Jack, Charlie Paul again. Jack, you've made the one key comment that everybody has failed to consider in this committee so far, and that's that recruiting occurs at the community level. To my knowledge, state associations don't actually get any members other than the ones that are recruited through the communities. So that's where we got to get our members also. And that's the organization that both we and the state has got to convince that dual membership with shared finances is the way to go. Now, how do we do that? And that's the details we got to start working on. Now, what I want to get some information for us from the states that now exist in NaCCRA. I know what Washington wants. I think I know what Illinois wants. Now I got to find out from the states, what do they see as the best way to go? And how do they see that this committee should do it? And try to get them to lean in the direction that we're leaning, through Bennett's organization, collecting all the dues and managing the membership for everybody. That'll save us all some money and make it easier for all the communities and states to operate.
Be interactive, Charlie. I don't think, we can get them all to lean the way we're leaning, but we also have to listen to them and lean back. We have a situation, for example, just this morning where some people in North Carolina seem unhappy with certain things, and we've got to be able to confer with them and treat them with great respect because they're part of our constituency. And so this is not going to be easy because we have a lot of people with opinions. We've been having the benefit of these conversations over the last few weeks, and I think we've made tremendous headway. I hope we all feel good that we're getting somewhere. It's not easy and it's not fully comfortable, but I think we're actually getting somewhere. And then as we open this up, and I know Walt Boyer is bringing together the state presidents, so I'm sure that he'll be carrying them on that if he hasn't already. That'll be a tremendous help.
Yeah, I'm going to get with Walt. I'd like to invite all the state presidents to participate in these meetings. And in fact, if they want to, I'd like to even make them a member of the committee of the meetings. But if they just want to participate, that's fine. Where we can get right from the horse's mouth out.
Yeah.
Any comment or questions on that?
Well,
I think we can look forward to say any new state organization wants to go forward, it would be in the way that we've just described. The problem of going retroactive is that takes time. And the more there are new states that are on board in the new method of one fee covering both, one fee per individual covering both NaCCRA and the state organization dues, it would seem to me would be the fastest thing we could do. And then for Connecticut and Pennsylvania and all the others that are a little bit different, that will happen over time.
Yeah, one thing we did about 10 or 12 years ago, we only had two state organizations that was legally constituted at that time, and the others wanted to become they called it chapters at that time in the IRS code, wanted to become a chapter of NaCCRA and use our 501c3. I was a registered agent at NaCCRA then, and I got a friend of mine that I dealt with out there to put together a package for me on what they would have to do, they being the states, and what NaCCRA treasurer would have to do to comply with this. And when we got that information and put it out in front of the states, they would not do it. They all decided rather than become a stepchild of NaCCRA, they wanted their own 501c3. And that's the way they elected to go. So we've tried this one time in the past and didn't make an inch of progress with it. So maybe we can do a little better this time.
I would hope so, but I think this business of helping them get started is something we can do, like we're trying to do with Washington, and we really should have done that with Illinois too. It will help them get started, and they can make up their minds later with what form of 501c they want to be. North Carolina is a 501c4. I'm not sure that's right, but that's what Harry Groves decided in the beginning, and he was a lawyer, constitutional lawyer, and he decided that was best for us. So,
and Illinois is 501c4.
Yeah.
And I think we'll probably go the same way just because of the complications of doing a C3 at this point.
I don't know how that rumor got started. There's really no more complications on a C3 than there are a C4.
Not true.
That's changed.
Let's not get into it.
Well, that's not what RIS told me last week when I went to them.
Well, just try getting out at 1023 and getting it approved. We went through that here in the last 4 months or so for our local community, and it was a big deal, and they wouldn't pay attention to us until we had paid a big legal fee. You have to have a lawyer, or they won't take you seriously.
And it's 6 months to a year, I understand. I know that other things have done well.
All because of the scandal that the IRS had with it.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, this has been
yes.
I've got to drop off in a few minutes, but I wanted to ask a question just as it relates to, at least one element of the conversation. And it's more, I'd say for Frank Little and Jack Snyder. Aside from the revenue share concept, from a ongoing standpoint, just a question, would it have been helpful or, I'll just leave it at that, would it have been helpful or desired for your organizations to have some seed funding to start the development prior to, the time period of which you had a nucleus where you could start to generate revenue share? Would you have been interested in a grant if it had been available through NaCCRA, like a one-time grant to help spur some initial development activities? It's just a question.
The answer from Snyder is absolutely. It would have been very nice. We were fortunate. We had one generous individual who gave us $1,000, which was very helpful at the time that we were all pulling out of our pocket. And
who was that? Who was that, Jack?
Who was that? That was Jack. Jack Cummings.
Well,
yeah,
he was our sugar daddy, and we appreciate that very much.
You couldn't get NaCCRA to do what needed to be done, so I just wrote what was needed out of my own funds.
Yes, you did.
I think, from our viewpoint, I think it would have been very helpful if we had had an opportunity to even borrow some money. I mean, it doesn't have to necessarily be a grant or anything of that nature, because once we get some organization, we'll cover it back again. But knowing that, let's say, we could have had access to an advance of up to $5,000, let's say, just picking a number out of the air, would have, I think, enhanced our ability to move forward, because we would, certain things we would have needed to do. And to be honest with you, when we started up, it was sort of a we don't even know what we're doing kind of thing, other than just somebody telling us, well, send in your money. And I don't think that was the best way in the long term. So, yes, I think it could be very helpful, but I don't think it needs to be a grant. I think if there is just an ability for us, for a state group, to take an advance for a period of time, that would have been very helpful.
Okay. And just, Mr. Chairman, just one more thing. I just, there's been reference to the document, primarily from, Mr. Snyder, in terms of the state affiliate guidebook. The majority of that frame of language was pulled from the guide to operating a local FLICRA chapter, which we use here in Florida. And Mr. Cumming, obviously, as he normally does, trying to move the process along with the NaCCRA, used a lot of that narrative for the document that Mr. Snyder referenced. So, but we certainly all understand, where the confusion came in relative to it's a living document, but the board never signed off on it, quote unquote. But I just thought it was important, to kind of at least know where the root cause came from that, and
sure.
So.
And I think, I don't know, I'm not speaking for Bennett here, but speaking for Illinois, it would have been helpful beyond the first several hundred if we could have counted on Bennett and some kind of standardized method that all of the NaCCRA and state members are in one place, because they provide to us the way to split it out by what community you're in and what state you're in and by zip code and all that kind of thing, which from a marketing perspective opens up all kinds of very attractive possibilities for us. So I would be in favor of at least recommending anyway, subject to knowing what the final costs are, that Bennett be able to provide that at extra cost, of course, for each state at some point in time when they are beyond what they can do with their own spreadsheets, or the voluntary secretary who does that.
I think it was very helpful.
Jack Cumming, a couple of thoughts. One, I think, Jack Snyder, you're on there's a lot of merit, as Charlie mentioned earlier, in having a professional administrator, because a bunch of volunteers all have their own ideas, and sometimes things get forgotten, or people go on vacation, or they get sick, or it just doesn't get done. So that's one thing. The problem with this guide to community formation is one that I alluded to earlier, where this group has not reviewed documents. Well, the NaCCRA board is the same way. So when that guide was first drafted and sent to Joe Walton, who was then the treasurer, to review it from a financial perspective, and Bob Nicholson, who was then the membership vice president to review it from a membership point of view, they both rejected it without reading it. And we never had a meeting to get together and read through the document to see whether it was achieving what we wanted. We now have a document. I drafted something, a starting point, to look at how an organization like Connecticut might transition forward. And I sent that.
Okay, so I'm checking out.
Bennett, have you got everything you need?
Yes, sir. I have to sign off too, but thank you, sir.
All right, let me get, when we come back, we will meet. We will meet the second Monday in January. Our agenda when we meet in January is to arrive at a consensus of this committee on how to formulate a recommendation to the NaCCRA board to have individual members only, but those individuals can include residents who live in CCRCs, management who support the NaCCRA concept, and family members of NaCCRA concept can also become members if this committee so desires. In addition to that, we'll want to come up with revenue sharing, and I can tell you right now we stand somewhere between $3 and $10. I have not budged off of the $10 level. In fact, I wish we could have got that done today by eliminating the lifeline. But we're going to go to work on actually doing that. I think we've got enough background now, and I'm going to try to bring a resident in from all the states and communities who do not have representation on this community. We have a couple of communities in New York are good, solid supporters of NaCCRA, and their voice should be heard. And we'll do that on the second Monday in January. And I'll
January 11th. What time?
The 2 to 4 was working real fine, I think.
All right, 2 to 4. Which time?
Eastern Standard.
Okay. So 2 o'clock. Okay.
And I don't care if we change it every now and then. Whatever works best. I know it's easier to get this block of telephone calls all at the same time, regular. If there's no questions, I'd like to wish all of you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you much.
Thank you.